Welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show on 94.7 The Pulse. Music, interviews, news, and, well, Two Blokes Chatting. Now, here are the two blokes.
But the voice you heard is the man, Sam C. He joins us on the phone. G'day, Sam. You got Neil here. The other voice is Rob.
G'day, Neil. How you going?
Doing very well. Thanks for joining us here on the Two Blokes Chatting radio show. Great to have your company.
My pleasure.
We were thinking, it'd be good to get a representative, someone who played for Sherbet, someone who played in the Flying Circus, someone who played in Fraternity, someone who played in Southern Cross, Zazoff Brothers, Country Radio, Stockley C and Mason. We couldn't fit them all in the room, so we thought we'd just get you.
There you go.
You've seen a bit, and you've, of course, famously had a lot to do with John Farnham, and even took a bit of time out to be Steve Vizard's musical director, so you haven't done that much.
You've done some research. Yeah, I did. It's been a very interesting journey, I guess. The music business is peaks and valleys, and in between the valleys I've had some great experiences. It's been fantastic.
Sam, I'm always intrigued about what makes a good song a great song, or an ordinary song a good song, and it seems that so much is important in the songwriting stage, but it's the actual production side of making the record. And I'm intrigued. The song we're going to be playing soon, which you wrote, Reasons, that John Farnham did, it's a song that I love, and I thought it was the best off that album. But there seems to be a bit of uniqueness about the production. When you wrote that, did you realise what you had, or did it come to...
I don't. Look, I'm not sure you can be entirely objective about your own work, and they're my babies, my songs, so sometimes you get a bit too close to them, probably. With that one, the initial idea sort of came to me, and that was cool, but it percolated over a few months to be more a statement of where my life was at the time, because I was trying to be positive and live in the moment, which is the theme of the song. And I guess it just that lyrics for that part came out quite quickly once I decided what it actually all meant, and then the arrangement that David Hirschfelder did of it was pretty faithful to my demo, except of course my horrible old voice compared to John's is another matter. I'll tell you that I wrote it in the key of A, and John sings it in D, which is quite a big gap.
It is a big gap.
Means nothing to me. I just bloody love it anyway. So well done, and thank you.
3 tones higher.
Well, yeah, no, it's quite a jump.
Yeah, absolutely.
John can sing. He could sing the phone book, and he could sing it in a number of keys, as they say.
Yeah.
The other thing that intrigued me about that too, Sam, finding that you had written that song, I do recall reading an article about the importance that it was a comeback time for John Farnham, and he really needed to make it work, and they searched far and wide to make sure they got the right song. So to have one of your own selected in that very, very vast search must have been very proud.
Oh, no, look, that song has been a saviour, and probably, truthfully, is the reason I've been able to stay a musician for my whole life, because A, the royalty checks were good, but also it led to other opportunities. But I guess, as I recall, there were 1,000 songs that they listened to, probably at least 30 seconds of. And, in those days it was cassettes, and there were boxes and boxes of them that were gone through. I'd just done a tour. We had a band which was sort of partly the record band for Whispering Jack and that. And I think I had 5 songs in that list, and as songs for Whispering Jack came in, I could see my list getting dwindled, and that's fair enough. and finally Reasons was the only, the last man standing. So that was okay, and I was so thrilled to have any song done by John, so it was great.
And I think I'm right in saying it certainly was the highest selling Australian album ever. So to be part of that has got to be a major achievement, I would have thought.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
And I still, I play it at every show in my somewhat baritone version. And people, I'm very proud of the fact that people relate to it, because we had a bloke come into a show recently. He just sort of said, it means a lot to me, that the lyric in that song. And that's the thing I guess I'm most proud of, that people relate to it.
And they think you're doing a marvellous cover version of a John Farnham song, which is always good.
Only for the first 2 seconds. I certainly let them know.
So let's wind the clock all the way back, because we've just gone through an absolute who's. I forgot to mention also, I think you had a fair bit to do with the bicentennial as well, didn't you?
No, not. Well, I can't really remember. What was the bicentennial 100 years ago?
Yeah, it's been a long time ago.
No, I didn't do so much of that.
Okay.
I had a little run of, grand finals, and I wrote the music for the opening of the tennis centre, that sort of stuff.
Okay.
But no, the bicentennial I don't think I had much to do with.
You can't.
I'd have missed that.
You can't trust the. Can't trust the internet anymore, can you? Hey, so our research department is dreadful here, Sam. We're going to have words with them. The work experience kids, we're giving them a go. So wind the clock back. So where did it all start in terms of getting into the music industry?
Well, I guess I remember telling someone recently that I was crook at home when I was about 13, and the Beatles' "I Feel Fine" came on the TV, and I don't know if you recall, it's got this feedback note that's...
Doing, that was my imitation.
That's
poor.
The very one. You did it well. And I said to my dad, Dad was sort of a semi-pro musician. He'd sort of go out and do gigs occasionally as a bass player. And I said to Dad, what was that? And he said, a bit of old rubbish, I don't know. And I think that's when I sort of decided I've got to pursue this. And we moved back to Sydney, and I started sort of looking for different gigs. And I used to go to a mod club down near Central Railway called, what was it called? Union Jacks. And there were a lot of Pommy kids, a lot of Scots. And I met this bloke, Dennis Lachlan, who ended up being the lead singer of Sherbet, the first line of Sherbet. And we became good mates, and we used to, we sort of ended up putting a band together with Clive Shakespeare, who's well known as he was really the leader of the band because he was much more mature than anyone else. And so that's kind of what happened. And the catch was that I had to play keyboards in that band, and because Clive was the guitar player and he was the boss. And I was very frustrated by that after a year. But the funny story about it for me was that my parents, or my mother, was very keen for me to have something to fall back on, as parents used to be. And so she was hoping I'd become a doctor or a lawyer. And I said, no, I really wanted to be a musician. And Dennis had to come round and convince my parents to guarantee a loan so I could buy a Hammond organ. And so I got kind of trapped in this keyboard vortex with Sherbet. And ultimately, that sort of is why I left the band, much to my mother's dismay at that stage. She said, you fool, they're going to be huge, that band.
To be replaced by Garth Porter's no disgrace, though.
No, that's true. And I often, when I see Garth, which I do occasionally up in Sydney, I say, I used to be Garth Porter before you were.
A lot of people don't realise that Sherbet were a pretty big, not big band, but certainly a reasonably popular band in and around Sydney in the early 70s. Before How's That came out, a lot of folk in Melbourne, I suspect, didn't know a great deal about them.
No, I think that's probably right. I only did one trip to Melbourne with that band, and I think one to Brisbane. So yeah, we were just doing clubs. I guess I had this day job, and I became a professional musician when we were offered a gig in King's Cross playing at a club for GIs, who were out on doing R&R from Vietnam. So I threw in my day job. My mother at this point was going out of her mind. But, I think I was making $10 more a week doing that than my day job. So I kept saying to Mum, look, the trajectory is up all the way.
and what could possibly go wrong working in a bar in King's Cross in the late 1960s, early 1970s? Nothing could go wrong there, could it?
Nothing. Doing lunchtime sessions, and I hope it doesn't offend people's sensibilities, but it was kind of a front for a brothel. So it was, the audience was changing every hour. It's quite amazing.
So move on from Sherbet. Where to next?
Well, in the meantime, Sherbet got a job in a club called Jonathan's, and the senior band at that club was Fraternity. I knew those guys because they'd been playing around Sydney for a long time anyway. Bands, one was Levi Smith's Clefs. And I became very friendly with a couple of the guys in the band, and I used to go, they lived in Paddington, I used to go around and hang out, and we'd listen to music and stuff. And I particularly became mates with the bass player, Bruce Howe. And he and I were both inveterate whingers, and I'd be going, I want to play guitar, I'm sick of playing these bloody keyboards, and so boring. And so Bruce, in his wisdom, had found out that Flying Circus were not terribly happy with their then guitar player. So the two of the Flying Circus lived 2 doors down from Fraternity's house. And so I sort of became friends with them as well. And then there was a Vietnam moratorium march, and the guitar player refused to play at this thing because it wasn't a paid gig. So that was the catalyst for them to give him the heave-ho and asked me to join as a guitarist, keyboard player. So that I was happy with that. That was great. And in the event, we went up to Taree in New South Wales to rehearse, and the keyboards never arrived, so it was I just had a guitar. So we were writing and learning their repertoire on guitar, and came back, went to Melbourne, and the keyboards were never really mentioned again. And I have to say, we arrived in Melbourne, and I'd never played a professional gig as a guitar player. And the guitar player I was replacing was a little-known guy called Red McKelvey, who was a magnificent player. He played on Richard Clapton's early records and just was a legendary player in Sydney. And so I was terrified, and I sort of scraped through, is all I can say. But it was, that was a baptism of fire for sure. So anyway, I ended up in Flying Circus, and they'd recently won the Battle of the Sounds, and our prize was a trip to England, but we decided that we weren't really suited to England, which was a good call, and ended up going to San Francisco. Weren't allowed to work there, but we'd done a tour with a Canadian band and become friends with them. So we ended up going to Canada, and that was an amazing experience too, because I think we were being paid more in Canada than we had as an unknown band than we had been in Australia as supposedly one of the top 5 bands. So it was a wonderful experience. And I'll say the first night we got to San Francisco, I went to the Fillmore and saw Aretha Franklin, so it was mind-blowing from start to finish, that trip. And in the meantime, how many hours do we have to...
Oh, we'll just keep chatting.
Okay. In the meantime, Fraternity's keyboard player decided to leave, and they asked me to join. And I was very torn because I loved the Flying Circus, but the Fraternity guys were the masters as far as I was concerned musically. And I still have a lot to learn now, but I had heaps to learn then. And so I just sort of regretfully decided to change horses in the middle of the stream again. Probably a tactical error, but I came back and moved to Adelaide with Fraternity, who incidentally had just won the Battle of the Sounds again. So they took the trip to England ultimately, and it was predictably a disaster because Australia wasn't the flavour of the decade in those days. We were regarded as hoons and bogans, which we probably were.
But the Hoadley's Battle of the Sounds, as it was called, in the late 60s, early 70s, it was the prize, wasn't it? Like, so many great bands won it.
Well, it was, if you think Masters, Apprentices, not the Easy Beats, I don't think, but the Groove, the Group, who else? Yeah, but Sherbet ultimately won it too. I think they won the last one.
Yeah.
So I'd sort of been in 3 Hoadley's Battle of the Sounds winners without ever having competed, which was somewhat of a, is that an achievement? Not really.
Oh, but you take it every time. So there's been a number of other bands and so on along the way, and you've obviously played with some amazing artists. We'll talk a bit about what you're doing now in a few minutes because we want to obviously pump up your tyres a bit and get a few people to come along and see you. But you did do that stint with the John Farnham ensemble, if you will. We've had a couple of John's, Lisa Edwards is a friend of the show, and a couple of others as well. So it's just obviously it was the place to be, I would have thought.
Well, I think when I was with John, I think he was sort of trying to stop being Johnny still, and they were trying to reposition him. So the first stint I had with him, it was a bit of a tough battle, And I think incidentally, another time I replaced this try-hard guitar player. The guy before me was Tommy Emmanuel, so that was amazing.
He needs to get out and do a bit more, doesn't he?
Yeah, doesn't he ever? Yeah. But anyway, so I joined that band, and I think they were sort of the first solo album John did was a bit polite, and I think they wanted to move into a bit more rock direction. And John's somebody who can sing a musical comedy song, and he can sing like Roger Daltrey or Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin. He's got such an incredible range, and so I think it was just trying to figure out how can we sort of dirty up his image without making him into Ozzy Osbourne. So that was kind of the strategy of getting me involved, I think. And I was sort of doing a lot of writing for with
we're having some Vodafone problems, I think, Sam. You're just breaking up a little bit.
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah, it was the Partridge Family who said breaking up was hard to do. They clearly haven't heard Vodafone, have they?
No, truly. I don't know what it is. I'm sorry. So where were we?
You were dirtying up John Farnham.
Well, somewhat, but yeah. But LRB were having problems with Glenn Shorrock. Well, they weren't getting on, so they decided to replace him with John. And I was sort of out on a limb, really, and I quite understand why John had to do it. But it was a marriage that didn't really work when they took the band to America. The people loved Glenn, and he was the front man of the band. Excuse me. So I think ultimately it was sort of a failed experiment, and that's where I sort of got back involved with John, and it was the precursor to Whispering Jack.
Yeah. Well, we are getting close to the end, and that phone line is better than it was, but it's still a bit grainy. So we probably should talk about what you're doing now. You are part of the cleverly named Field, Sea and Mason, obviously straight out of the same marketing department as Cotton, Keys and Morris.
That's right.
Now, the Field is Lindsay, obviously of John Farnham fame. You're the Sea, and Glyn Mason, who obviously has been in as many bands as what you have along the way, and we're hoping to talk to Glyn in the next few weeks as well. Field, Sea and Mason are the people that we heard at the start of this interview with that song that Warwick wrote. You got a few gigs coming up.
We do so, yeah. Well, we're playing a special at Bird's Basement on March the 4th, which is in downtown here, and that's going to be a fantastic night. But we sort of do our regular bunch of gigs at venues like tomorrow at the Rising Sun in South Melbourne, which is always a fun afternoon. We're doing a gig with Angus Birchall on drums at the Beau Morris Cricket Club on the 26th of Feb. And as I said, then that Bird's Basement thing on the 4th of March. So all of our gigs are advertised on our website, which is fieldseamason.com.
That's exactly what's on my phone in front of me, which is why I sounded knowledgeable. Now, calling it the Rising Sun, you might as well tell us you're at the Railway Hotel. There are lots of Rising Suns. Can we be a bit more specific?
Yeah, sure. The Rising Sun that we're playing at is on Raglan Street, South Melbourne.
Right. I was going to Richmond or Footscray, but the one in South Melbourne's equally good, and not only that, they've got a really good floor show tomorrow at 3 o'clock.
Let's do so.
Now, I'm also told the one at Bird's Basement on Saturday the 4th of March, 7:30, that's, as you say, in Melbourne, there's going to be a special guest at that event. His name is Warwick Hadfield, who is the songwriter who wrote the song that we started the show, the interview with, and he is going to be there, he tells me, on the night. So if you want to get along and see Field, Sea and Mason and catch up with Warwick, the journalist and songwriter who we interviewed a couple of weeks ago, Bird's Basement, Melbourne on Saturday the 4th of March, but all details at Field Sea Mason, FIELDSEE Mason, MASON.com. All the details, you'll find them there.
Indeed you will, yeah.
Now, we're going to say goodbye and play a song that you may be familiar with. It's off the Whispering Jack album by a bloke called John Farnham. I reckon you can guess which one we're going to play.
I don't know.
Sam C., thanks for joining us on the Two Blokes Chatting radio show, and well, you never know, we might pop up at one of your gigs very soon, say good day there.
And
please do.
Thanks, and may I add congratulations on a fine body of work, and it's great to see, as I said off air to you earlier, Sam, that the music industry allows plenty of your vintage to keep doing what you love doing, and you don't just do it because you love doing it, you're still doing it very, very well. So good on you all. Get out there and get amongst it.
Yeah, bop till you drop.
Good on you, mate.
Thanks, Sam. See you, mate.
Thank you very much.